Hello, and welcome to our inaugural podcast. We have decided to start a Healthy and Happy podcast, and hopefully we'll be providing good information each week that will help you get to know us a little better, and also have some good skills, information and skills that will help you incorporate some of these healthy and happy principles in your life. The objective is to be able to provide scientifically backed information that helps you with real everyday challenges. And as we develop this, I would like to be able to incorporate your questions and make sure that we're talking about things within the subject matter each week that are relevant to challenges and difficulties that you're facing in your life. And we'll be having guests that join me, and just hopefully having productive conversations that you'll find helpful. This month we are focusing on the first principle in the Healthy and Happy series, which is resource management. And everything that we do in life is really powered by, propelled by the resources or lack thereof that we have in our lives. There's a balance between stressors and resources that is constantly fluctuating in our lives, and in order for us to be able to have sufficient resources to meet the demands in our lives, we've got to be taking good care of ourselves and engaging in things that give us resources. I have a pretty simple analogy that I use, and many of you may have already heard it, but it's the reservoir analogy. And it's just a really simple way to think about how many resources we have in our lives and in our relationships, and what we're doing to manage the emotional drains that exist. Everything that we do, of course, requires energy and an outlay of resources, and so one of the golden rules of the reservoir is that you can't give what you don't have, and so you've got to fill up in order to be able to do that. And so each individual has a reservoir of emotional energy that we function on throughout our days, and throughout each day. And as we go throughout the day, things happen that drain us. And some of those things are big things, and some are really small, as insignificant as the shoes that you want to wear. You can't find one of them, or you have to snarf down your breakfast because you're going to be late to school or to work or whatever. To bigger things, you might get in a car accident on your way to the office, or you might find out you've got some big health problem or concern. You might get in a fight with your partner or one of your kids, and so there are constantly things that drain us of our resources as we go throughout our days. And there are two main categories of drains that exist. There are solvable problems, or repairable drains, and there are unsolvable problems or irreparable drains. And healthy management of those is very different. If we have a solvable problem or a repairable drain, then of course healthy management of that is to slow down enough and to recognize what the problem is and what the possible solutions are, and then to do something to start moving toward that solution or those solutions. And even if the solution takes a long time, it could take years. If you're underemployed, you might choose to go back to school or to acquire more training, and that could be a 4-year, a 2-year, a 10-year long process. But as long as you're doing something to take steps to remedy that problem, then you're handling that particular solvable problem in a healthy way. And then there are also, another quick example of that, or maybe some examples of that. There are also, it could be things like if you're unhealthy, then you can start an exercise regimen. Or if you've got anger management problems, then you can develop anger management skills. If you have self-esteem issues, if you have relationship problems, parenting issues, then all of those things are solvable problems. And so healthy treatment of that type of drain in our life, that type of drain on our resources, is to take or start taking steps to remedy those problems. Healthy treatment of an unsolvable problem or an irreparable drain is very different. What are examples of unsolvable problems? Certain health problems might be unsolvable. If you have a disease, if you have diabetes, how tall you are. If you have a dream to play in the NBA and you're 5'3", that's probably an unsolvable problem. Death is certainly an unsolvable problem that impacts many of our lives, impacts all of our lives at one point or another. But loss that we experience as somebody close to us dies creates an unsolvable problem that you can't merely remedy. You can't just bring them back. So those are examples of unsolvable problems in our lives. And so what is healthy treatment of unsolvable problems? Healthy treatment of an unsolvable problem is to recognize that drain is going to be bleeding resources continuously. You can't plug it. You can't block it off. And so what we have to do in those instances is to make sure that we're depositing more than we're losing through that drain. And next week we'll talk more about how to do that. We'll talk about fillers and individual fillers in particular, and how to fill back up. But I just want you to be cognizant of and mindful of the fact that there is a very real emotional reservoir of energy that exists that you function on every single day in and day out. And if you're not mindful of where the level of your resources is, then you can become depleted, and when we're depleted, we're sucking mud. I don't know if you've ever stepped in the bottom of a pond or reservoir, but it's pretty yucky. That's where the yucky stuff exists, and so typically by the end of each day, for most of us, that's what we're functioning on. When our resources are depleted and our individual emotional reservoirs of energy are depleted, we're sucking mud. And it happens as a very normal part of life, and it's something that has to be managed in order to be able to effectively meet the demands that are placed upon us. And another thing that I want to point out in this balance between stressors and resources is that, if you think about a teeter-totter or a balance, in order for that balance to work and to be balanced, there has to be equal weight on either side, right? And so if you've got your resources on one side and your stressors on the other side, in order for you to be able to meet the demands of your stressors, you've got to have enough resources to balance that out. But there's a really interesting thing that happens that research has borne out, and also that I've seen in my clinical practice across the years, is that as our stressors increase, logic would say that we need to increase our resources, right, to balance that out. Unfortunately, that's not what most of us do. Most of us, in those moments when there's increased demand, we actually decrease our resources in those moments. I'm not sure why that's the tendency that we as human beings have, but it is. So as we become more stressed, then we stop exercising, and we stop going to bed on time, so we're not getting as much sleep. We stop eating as healthfully, and we swing by and grab fast food or eat readily accessible junk. Swing into the gas station and just grab some junk to get us through. Frequently, we stop doing other fillers. We stop listening to music, or we stop reading because we feel like we don't have time and we're harried and we need to be dealing with our stressors all the time. Actually, was meeting with somebody that I'm coaching last night who is a teacher, and in this COVID environment, our teachers are on the front lines and dealing with a tremendous amount of stress and frustration and being pulled in 500 directions, and with decreased time that they normally have to do their jobs because they're having to do other things to try to help keep students safe. And so this client of mine is stretched really thin and feeling really stressed because there's been a huge influx on stressors as kids have come back to school and school's back in session with these increased demands, and she has less time on the resource side, and so she has struggled to be able to meet those demands, and has, like many of us do, many of the resources that she normally does and was trying to actually increase in her life, these past few weeks have been squished out of her life. And so as she and I talked last night, we were brainstorming solutions and trying to figure out how to help her get resources. And so if you're going to be in situations where there are increased stressors and demand placed upon you, it isn't a luxury. It's really difficult and complicated, but it isn't a luxury to be able to not increase your resources as well. And we'll talk more about how to do that later, but I just want you to be mindful during this week of, like, okay, what is the balance? How is the balance going between my stressors and my resources? Do I feel like I have sufficient resources to meet the demands placed upon me, or do I feel like I'm just barely getting through my day each day? And then we'll give you some more tips and tools to be able to manage that. But anyway, that's our first podcast. Let me know if you have any questions about resource management. You can, let us know. You can shoot me an email. You can message me on Instagram or Facebook, and I'll try to address those things. And anyway, hopefully this is a useful format, and I look forward to you participating with us and being part of our little podcast family here. Talk to you later. Bye.